Hi, my name is Bradley Freeman, and the social problem that I'm choosing to focus on is environmental racism. In our textbook, Eitzen and colleagues assert that environmental racism is an overwhelming likelihood that toxic producing plants and toxic waste dumps are located where poor people, especially people of color, live. Understanding that Detroit is a poor city that is populated by a majority of African Americans, I decided to see whether or not there were any cases that suggested acts of environmental racism. Unfortunately, it turns out that many residents in Detroit are exposed to toxic producing plants and toxic waste dumps. However, my main focus will be on the residents of Southwest Detroit, in particular the 48217 zip code. The reason that I chose this location is because the interstate I-75 that is located behind me is the same one that runs through the middle of the 48217 zip code. As you can see right now in my pictures, this is the map of a city of Wayne County, and the city of Detroit is outlined in red. And then right here, this is the city of Detroit, and the 48217 zip code is outlined in red at the bottom of Detroit. And then right here is a photo that I found from a website. It was posted by the Detroit Coalition Against Tar Sands that depicts how a lot of residents feel in the 48217 zip code. As you can see, it says, "Remove petroleum coke from Detroit now. Public safety above profit." According to studies made by environmental scientists at the University of Michigan in 2010, the zip code 48217 that is located in Southwest Detroit had an average toxic burden of 2,576, whereas the ATB among Michigan zip codes was 56. Areas where health conditions are of this nature are known as sacrifice zones. A sacrifice zone is an area where environmental conditions and human health are traded for economic gain. This is usually the case only in certain areas where the residents are financially and politically powerless. In the 48217 zip code, many residents cannot afford to move away from their area since the average household income was $20,000 below the national average. Moreover, the interests of the residents in these areas aren't being taken seriously. In the legal suits that were enacted in 1999, it was found that the Michigan State Department of Environmental Quality knew that Cybil, which was one of the companies that was being charged, had a bad air quality emissions record, but chose not to act upon it because Wayne County was supposed to be monitoring the situation. However, the Wayne County Air Quality Management Division did in 1995, but only fined Cybil $15,500, and this was only after 169 complaints were made by residents in the prior 3 years. Even then, fines like these are usually offset by huge tax breaks that these and many other similar companies receive. Over the past 20 years, residents in the 48217 zip code have repeatedly been fighting for studies of their health to be conducted by agencies, more air monitoring, tougher enforcement against plants that pollute, and an end to new and expanding industrial plants. Yet legislation has been repeatedly passed because the city council does not want to choke off jobs. On the bright side, residents in Southwest Detroit and surrounding areas had decided to organize and come together as groups in order to take on the problems themselves since the state has been slow to act. Some of these groups are Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision and Delray Action United Council. Collectively, these groups and others have worked to have their voices heard and to provide each other with the resources such as access to the internet in order to educate others about the situation. In the past 3 years, Jenny Lee established the Detroit Digital Justice Coalition, which works not only to bring internet access to 48217, but to get residents to use that internet in a meaningful way. The most important action that needs to be done is to create legislation that takes into account the cumulative impact of pollution and decisions on permits for industry, which is something that 14 other states, including California, does. Also, they need to create legislation that allows residents of poor and minority neighborhoods to have input on permits for polluters. In 2010, Michigan was developing a policy similar to this, but because of the city's financial emergency, unelected government officials have been appointed by the government. Consequently, they have the ability to determine what happens and not the citizens of Detroit. Therefore, action needs to be taken to change this law and instead include neighborhoods to have an input on permits for polluters if we want to end the environmental racism that is occurring in neighborhoods like the 48217 zip code and close to home.